Chronic pain and depression, these two things have become a part of my life, woven together in ways that are hard to explain, but impossible to deny. Sometimes I'm not even sure where one ends and the other begins. They seem to feed off each other, turning small moments of discomfort into something much deeper and harder to escape from. Living with chronic pain is more than just a physical experience. Yes, there's the pain itself, the constant ache, the sharp reminders in my body. But over time, it becomes something more than that. It wears you down. Not just physically, but emotionally and mentally too. It's not just the pain in my back, or my legs, or my shoulders. It's the way that pain seeps into my thoughts, into how I see the world. I think of the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, who once described life as a pendulum swinging between suffering and boredom. For me, pain has made the pendulum feel stuck on the side of suffering, as if the weight of each day is pulling me down. It's like the pain is always there in the background, whispering to me, reminding me of its presence. And when that happens, it's hard not to feel hopeless, or like the future will be more of the same. Pain in this way becomes not just a physical experience, but an emotional one too. It limits not just what I can do, but how I feel about myself and my life. It tells me that I'm not enough, that I'm broken, and after a while that message starts to sink in. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche talked about how suffering can shape us, how it can push us to question everything about our lives. Chronic pain does that. It makes me question who I am when I'm no longer able to do the things that once brought me joy, or even the simple things like getting out of bed easily or spending time with friends. And when those things are stripped away, it's not just the body that suffers, it's the mind, the spirit. That's where depression comes in. At first, it's just a shadow creeping in when the pain gets bad, but over time, that shadow grows, until it feels like I'm carrying two burdens, one in my body and one in my mind. It's like a vicious cycle. The pain feeds the depression, and the depression amplifies the pain. Suddenly, it's not just my body that feels heavy, it's everything. One of the hardest parts about depression, especially when it's linked to chronic pain, is the way it steals hope. The philosopher Albert Camus once wrote about the idea of the absurd, the feeling that life can be meaningless, and that our efforts to find meaning are always met with resistance. That's how it feels some days. The pain tells me I'm stuck, that nothing will change, and the depression echoes those thoughts, making it harder to imagine a way forward. The isolation of pain and depression. Another thing I've learned about chronic pain and depression is how isolating they can be. When you're in pain every day, it's hard to explain that to others. People might see you on a good day and think you're fine, or they might hear you say you're in pain but not really understand what that means for you, mentally and emotionally. Jean-Paul Sartre once said that hell is other people, not because people are inherently bad, but because being seen through others' eyes can feel like a kind of judgment. When I'm in pain, I feel that judgment, even if it's not really there. I feel like I should be able to push through it, like I should be stronger. But the truth is, the pain is relentless, and the more I try to ignore it, the more it grinds me down. And depression thrives in isolation. The more I feel like I'm alone in my pain, the deeper the depression digs in. It tells me that no one understands, that reaching out won't help, that it's better to retreat into myself than to burden others with what I'm going through. But here's something I've also learned. Suffering, while inevitable, doesn't have to define me. Nietzsche talked about the idea of amor fati, or the love of fate. The idea that we must embrace our circumstances, even the painful ones, if we are to grow. Now, I'm not saying that I love my pain or my depression, far from it. But I am learning that if I fight it too much, if I spend all my energy wishing it away, I lose myself in the struggle. Instead, I've been trying to acknowledge the pain, to accept that it's part of my reality, but not the whole of it. Some days that means taking small steps, choosing to engage with the world, even when my body protests. Other days it means allowing myself to rest, to recognize that healing isn't just about physical recovery, but about mental and emotional care too. it's a process. The philosopher Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of a concentration camp, spoke about how we can find meaning even in our suffering, that it's in our response to our pain that we find our deepest sense of purpose. For me, that means learning to navigate this complicated space between my body and my mind. It means recognizing that while pain and depression are part of my life, they don't have to control every part of it. Living with chronic pain and depression is a balancing act. Some days it feels impossible to find hope. But hope isn't always about believing that the pain will disappear. Sometimes it's about finding a way to exist with the pain and still reach for something more. In those moments of struggle, I remind myself that I am not just my pain. I am not just my depression. I am more than what my body feels or what my mind tells me on the hardest days. I am someone who is trying, who is learning, and who is still capable of joy, even if it looks different now. Thank you for walking with me through these thoughts today. If you're living with chronic pain, depression, or both, know that you're not alone. It's not an easy road, but together we can learn that even in our suffering, there is still room for hope, connection, and meaning.